reasonable person could possibly deny that when it comes to putting out AAA bangers, Sony is the master. That said, there are some key facts that can be touched upon to get a better understanding of why, in their campaign against Microsoft, Sony isn't comfortable with simply depending on their ability to make epic video games. Sony has made it clear, when it comes to the business model that consists of combining hardware and AAA game development, they want to remain at the top of the food chain. But it wasn't the Xbox alone that worried Sony. It was Microsoft's ability to bring attractive innovations to the industry and their potential staying power that was an even greater concern. Think about it. If Microsoft was a company that only developed games and provided a subscription service that consisted of their day one releases, Microsoft would be no more of a concern to Sony than Ubisoft or EA. But Sony had the Xbox in its sights before the first Xbox was even released. I can remember clearly the first time ever hearing about the Xbox. I can't remember the exact issue, but ironically, it was in an article that was published in the official PlayStation magazine approximately 1 year before the first Xbox was released. After that, there were a few additional articles published in the magazine that caused me to wonder why PlayStation was so concerned about the console, because at that time, the idea that anyone could even come close to competing with PlayStation was laughable. Fast forward a bit, myself and a few friends were standing in line at a local mall at 12 a.m. to pick up our brand new pre-ordered Xbox consoles. The idea of a couch co-op party on a console was unimaginable until this point. The Xbox was built to be a multiplayer machine with its Ethernet port on the back and 4 controller ports on the front. But when the first Xbox launched in 2001, it didn't land as well as Microsoft had hoped. Though the hardware was powerful for a console, the sales numbers were much lower than the company anticipated, but there were still indicators that the Xbox was a potential threat. It didn't take long before the Xbox was in second place, forcing Nintendo to cut their prices in half in 2004 to move back into the second place spot. Because of the power of the Xbox, word was spreading how much easier it was to develop games for the Xbox than the PlayStation. According to Lauren Lanning, a lead developer on the game Oddworld Munch's Odyssey, the Xbox was simply easier to program on. She also stated that Microsoft offered a level of support that was practically unseen in the industry. According to her, there were always Microsoft tech personnel walking around the studio to give assistance, but Microsoft had a problem. Like Nintendo, PlayStation would also turn up the heat by negotiating exclusive deals with third-party game developers. This was actually a smart move on PlayStation's part, so eventually Microsoft did the same by locking down a timed exclusive deal with Square Enix for Rise of the Tomb Raider. On that subject, gaming journalists, well, I won't desecrate that name, so I'll just go with G. Nelva, stated the following. Crystal Dynamics' Rise of the Tomb Raider is, at least temporarily, exclusive to Xbox platforms, and when that deal was announced on stage at Gamescom, people were dumbfounded. I was there among the audience, and those around me looked like they had been stuck by a hammer to the teeth. I assume he meant struck by a hammer, but anyway. I also remember this very clearly. People were acting like Phil Spencer marched into Square Enix with a military junta squad and forced them to surrender their new video game. The fact that this was a deal agreed upon by two parties seemed to escape the minds of everyone, including the media. Microsoft was simply trying to make their product more attractive to customers, which last time I checked is the job of any company that manufactures a product. Oddly, this was also the seed that planted the idea that Microsoft couldn't make its own games, so they had to depend on third-party game developers. This is hilarious when you consider the fact that earlier it was Sony who actually depended on third-party game developers for their success. While Nintendo focused on their own games such as Super Mario World and Legend of Zelda: A Link from the Past, PlayStation was finding its success with third-party game developers such as Namco and Konami to make games such as Ridge Racer and Metal Gear Solid. In fact, even on the PlayStation 4, Sony's top sellers weren't its in-house developed bangers. It was third-party games such as Call of Duty, Battlefield 1, FIFA 16, and Minecraft, which ironically is owned by Microsoft. The sad thing is, after the whole Tomb Raider debacle, Microsoft allowed itself to be intimidated into never seeking such deals again. They were vilified simply because they attempted to bring value to their own product. It was probably around this time that Microsoft figured if they're not going to be allowed to secure major exclusive deals like their competitor, they'll need a new strategy just to keep the doors open. A few years later, Microsoft began a campaign to reach customers outside of any console's reach by creating a shared ecosystem. Our point of view at Xbox is there's not one business model to rule them all, Spencer said. We actually think it's healthy, not just from an industry standpoint, but from a creative standpoint if multiple business models will work. If you say there are only 200 million people who will buy a gaming console in any gaming generation, then in order to grow the business, we have to get more per user. If it's a fixed number of players and it's about how you monetize each minute someone is playing, I think that's dangerous for us as an industry. I think we have to find new players and new methods of monetization to open up those player bases. Almost 2 years later, in an interview with Games Chronicle, Jim Ryan would practically state the exact same thing. I would also like to see a world where games that we make at PlayStation can be enjoyed by tens of millions of people, perhaps hundreds of millions of people. Right now, success with the current console model, a really great PlayStation hit, you're talking 10 or 20 million people being able to play that game. This is what Sony is truly afraid of. A company that not only makes games and consoles, but one that can also innovate and create new paths for success outside of the Sony model. One that can cause an entire industry to follow their lead, even if they don't have as many AAA bangers as Sony. More than likely, Microsoft will eventually find their footing when it comes to consistently pumping out top-tier AAA games, but Sony's concern has absolutely nothing to do with the game quality competition. Their concern now is the path that Microsoft is carving out for the industry, which will undoubtedly make the console model a small part of the gaming world. This is the model that would make tying down exclusive deals more expensive because developers would have to consider the number of players that wouldn't have access to their games. Paying developers not to negotiate deals with Microsoft would also become more expensive. Even with Microsoft struggling in many aspects of the business, they're making the console business model, a model that allows Sony to dominate the industry for generations, practically obsolete. We all know that in many industries you can find the finest products in what may be known as boutique shops. But Sony obviously has no interest in simply being known as the company that makes the best games, because the best way for PlayStation to protect their position at the top is to also be able to control the narrative and the direction the industry is heading towards. And Microsoft and other companies, to be perfectly honest with you, are proving that you don't necessarily need to be the company that's making the best games to do that. Okay guys, we're gonna go ahead and cut it right there. Hey look, if you liked the video, give it a thumbs up, and if you didn't like it, you can go ahead and give it a thumbs down, because you know what I always tell you, hey, I'm a big boy and I can definitely take it. And hey, if you get some time, please share the video, because you know something else I always say, YouTube's algorithm is brutal. And hey guys, as usual, stay safe.